All right. Well, good afternoon. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And in addition to my colleagues who I'll introduce here in a minute, we wanted to give special thanks to our friends at NAMI, at the Mental Health Liaison Group, and the National Association of Counties for being such great partners and for being here today. Of course, I want to thank my friend, Congressman Tony Cardenas, who's been such a champion and leader in the House of Representatives on this for years. My colleague and co-founder of the bipartisan Senate Mental Health Caucus, Senator Thom Tillis. Louder. All right. We're joined by Secretary Javier Becerra, another longtime friend. Give him a round of applause. And of course, FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel for their leadership in working to address the mental health crisis. Now, I want to set the stage for the great announcement today. Through the lens of our first conversation, Tom, you and I, about the potential for the formation of a caucus in the Senate. There's a lot of, let's just say, skeptical staff and members of the Senate from time to time. Well, here we go again. Here's another caucus. Maybe an opportunity for some staff to get together, but is it really going to do anything, right? And so we committed to each other that we would only do this if it was going to do something. And we started exploring the ideas of what we could do by sharing our personal stories. Because everybody knows somebody who at some point struggles with their mental health. We knew that the solutions we would advance as a caucus had to be bipartisan. They had to be tangible solutions that could help people and could help save lives. So that's why in December, the very first bill that our caucus introduced, that we introduced as a caucus, was to change the way that the FCC routes calls to the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And it should be obvious as to why. We know that 988, since its deployment, has already proven to be a life-saving tool supporting Americans in crisis across the country. But by working to route calls by a caller's actual location, rather than by the phone's area code, we're going to be in a position to be able to provide care as quickly and as safely as possible. In the same way that 911 calls, in the case of an emergency, are routed to local providers, local first responders, so an ambulance can come out and help quickly when you call 911. 988 should be tied to a caller's location, not their area code. So today's announcement that the FCC has taken the cue and is not waiting for the bill to pass, but is initiating the first step in the rulemaking process is exciting. It is an important step, and we're going to continue to urge the FCC to keep moving as quickly as possible throughout the process, because for a young student who may be away at college and in crisis, for a parent who may be cross-country at work asking for a friend, or a loved one who may have moved to a new city but still has their phone with an old area code, a few seconds in being connected to local responders, local service providers, can make not just a big difference, but can mean the difference between life and death. So thank you all for joining us today and celebrating this significant step forward. As our next speaker, let me call forward the chairwoman of the FCC, Commissioner Rosenworcel.
Thank you so much, Senator Padilla, Senator Tillis, Secretary Becerra, Congressman Cardenas. These are all great champions of mental health. Now, at the Federal Communications Commission, that's not our stock in trade. We are people who deal with technology and communications. But we came to realize that we could work with Congress to make sure that everyone in this country who's going through crisis has someone to call and someone who can listen. And that's why in 2022, we set up 988, the easy to remember 3-digit number for anyone who is in crisis. It's an extraordinary tool that everyone can access. Now, 80% of the calls we get to 988 come through mobile phones. And the thing about mobile phones is so many of us have telephone numbers that don't reflect where we live or where we may be calling from. So what I have proposed to my colleagues at the Federal Communications Commission is that instead of using the area code to route you to help when you're in crisis, instead we will route you based on where you are at any moment in time. It's called geo-routing. That means we can get you resources that are local, help that's nearby, and we might be able to save more lives. I think that's a terrific proposal, and it's my hope that my colleagues at the FCC will join me and join the people who are here today in making it happen. And then, of course, we can hand it off to our friends at the Department of Health and Human Services who can help deploy it. This is worth the fight. It's worth working on the technology. It's worth making mental health resources accessible to more people everywhere in this country. And that's what this initiative is about. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Our next speaker, former legislator in the state of California once upon a time, longtime member of Congress and leader in the House of Representatives, former Attorney General of the state of California. And I mention all this because all these experiences have added to his appreciation for what we're doing today, but he's here now as our Secretary of HHS, Secretary Javier Becerra.
Senator Padilla, to Senator Tillis, to Congressman Cardenas, thank you very much for championing an issue that is so important to so many Americans. To Chairwoman Rosenworcel, thank you so much. We've had conversations about this for quite some time. We understand how valuable this can be, but we have to put this in context. When the federal government, under the President's leadership, gave us the resources to make that hotline for those in mental health crisis easy to reach, we committed to make it so that no one would be stuck on hold or get hung up on, but that they would actually reach someone in their moment of crisis. And we knew it had to work well nationwide, and that's why the 3 digits versus a 10-digit number that could change based on what region of the country you were in was so valuable. But we knew it would quickly fall if people tried it and then it failed. And so it was so valuable to have it work well. Well, in the first 18 months after the launch in July of 2022, more than 8.5 million Americans have reached out on 988. And the good thing is they're reaching someone who's helping them. We know among them there are people, as the chairwoman said, who are using phones that have an area code different from where they happen to be located at that time that they're making the call. It is indispensable, in some cases life-saving, to have access to a caregiver virtually immediately as you're making that call. And so what is being done today by the FCC is going to save lives. No doubt about it. But more importantly, it's going to make the system work far better, more efficiently for so many. And so this will add to that, because when 9 of 10 Americans tell you that America has experienced a mental health crisis, we need to be on top of it. And so to our champions in the Senate and the House who are making this happen, and certainly to the movers at the FCC who are going to make this a reality, we at HHS and at SAMHSA, our agency that deals with mental health services, we are ready to go, because we know that there are more Americans who will make use of 988, and because of that, we'll get to see them for the holidays, at Christmas, for their birthdays, and we'll get to hug and kiss them rather than mourn that they didn't have somewhere to go. So, Senator Padilla, thank you very much for letting us be here. Great news today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Next speaker, my colleague, one of my buddies across the aisle from the great state of North Carolina, Senator Tom Tillis.
Thank you all, colleagues, Mr. Secretary, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here. 67,240. I didn't prepare that number for today. I've got a speech later on today. It relates to suicide, though. That is the number of veterans who have committed suicide since the day I was sworn into office on January 6, 2015. This is a step in a direction. This is an endless journey. So thank you, Madam Chair, for this work. I wonder, even if it only had a minor impact, how many of those veterans today in crisis, if they had simply been connected to a local resource, number one, if they had had access to 988, and then number two, most likely to an area where they'd gotten care, just how many we would have saved. I think it's so important to understand that each incremental step with the numbers that we're talking about, that's just veteran suicides. With the numbers that we're talking about, how this could make an enormous difference for thousands of people when they're in crisis, getting help from not only their family, but but professionals that are prepared to actually de-escalate and then get them the continuum of care that so many of them need to really be able to deal with their mental health challenges. So this is a great step in the right direction, but this is a journey that has no end. I wish that it would. There will always be other challenges. But then as a practical matter, being a data guy, I kind of presented that on the front end. How many of you have a phone that's other than the area code that you'd be calling from right now? Yep. Yeah, there you have it. Great work. Thank you.
And our next speaker, as I mentioned earlier, a true champion who's been on this issue for years and years and years, session after session after session in the House of Representatives, my colleague, my friend, Congressman Tony Cardenas.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Padilla. Thank you, Senator Tillis. And I'd just like to thank my Republican and Democratic colleagues of the House of Representatives who have been focused on this for years. But like it was mentioned, in the middle of 2022, for the first time, anyone in America could call a 3-digit number and actually get somebody on the line when they're having a mental health crisis. For example, a mother is saying, my son has locked himself in his room and he's saying he wants to commit suicide. That is a second-by-second necessity to get the help that that family needs to save a life. That's what 988 means. But as was mentioned earlier, today we're not just talking about a technicality. We're talking about a government that is actually listening and understanding of the needs of the American people. Americans walk around and travel around this country with one area code, and if they call, they may or may not get somebody around the corner, down the street, to answer that call when they call 988. So what we're talking about today is the action of the FCC to start their process of making sure that they go through their process to actually get to the point where they can administratively let the telephone companies know you need to implement this and this will save lives and this is the rule of the land. Now, when you're talking about senators and members of the House of Representatives, you're talking about people who can carry a bill, which we are in the House and the Senate, that says this is now the law of the land, so that it's applicable everywhere, all the time, for every person and every corporation that's involved in this. And then also what we're doing here is demonstrating to all of you that we have the person just below the president, a secretary, who actually is in charge of health and human services, who we've had personal conversations face to face. We've had conversations in committee about this, and this administration and Javier Becerra, the head of Health and Human Services, the secretary here, is committed to this as well. As he mentioned to you earlier, this is about life-saving actions, and this is about our government doing what our government is supposed to do. We elect people and appoint people to listen, to know, and to learn and act. Today is about letting everybody know that we are taking action, and we're all determined to make sure that we follow our process and get it done as quickly as possible with all the support from every level that is required. So today is about coming together and letting you all know we are on it, we're determined to get it done, and I believe we will. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Before we open up to questions, just one final reminder. What we're talking about is soon to be upgraded 988. 988 is already operating. If you or someone you know is experiencing a crisis, contact 988. You can call, you can text in English or in Spanish, hopefully other languages soon. But please reach out to 988. And with that, thank you all again for joining us. We'll open up to any questions from the press.
In terms of timelines, when do you expect the rulemaking process to
I'll defer to the expert on the FCC rulemaking process on
We have
that.
a preference on speed.
I am sharing with my colleagues this proposal today, and we're going to do everything possible to impress upon them the need to vote on this fast. This is an issue that has bipartisan support with good reason. We can make help more accessible to more people faster. So my hope is that we will have this rulemaking available and out the door at the agency in the next several weeks.
Awesome. Other questions? Thank you all for coming.